The Chronicles of Narnia is probably my favorite book series of all time, and C.S. Lewis is my favorite author. I love these books, and I'm excited to dive into this first one, The Magician's Nephew. Have you read the Chronicles of Narnia? Which is your favorite? Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and this is my spoiler talk book review / analysis for The Magician's Nephew, which technically is book number 6 in the Chronicles of Narnia, because that's the order C.S. Lewis wrote them in. But if you have this really cool bound published edition that I have, you'll find that Magician's Nephew is published as book number 1. And it's because Magician's Nephew is a prequel about the origins of the White Witch, the origins of Narnia, the beginnings of all of the stories. So chronologically, it fits nicely as book number 1. But if you've never read the Chronicles of Narnia series before, I think there's a bit more impact getting into the flow that C.S. Lewis was in and reading them in the order that he wrote them in, and I have that order in my description, so you could definitely check that out. So Magician's Nephew, A+. This is definitely one of my favorite books in the Chronicles of Narnia, and I think one of the things that makes it my favorite is it just has a different feel than the other books. The Chronicles of Narnia kind of has this pattern that it follows where these children stumble upon Narnia. Aslan gives them this call to adventure, and they answer that call, so it seems to follow that pattern. But Magician's Nephew breaks that mold just a little bit, adding different elements into it, which give it this fresh flavor. So first off, you have Uncle Andrew, and he's one of the villains of this. And what does he do? He creates these magic rings, and what we find is he's a magician wannabe, but in reality, he has no idea what he's doing. He's playing with powers that he can't even begin to comprehend. So he tricks Diggory and his friend Polly into taking a hold of these rings and disappearing from our world and into another world. And where they end up is this wood in between the worlds, which is actually a very cool concept because it's this wood that has all these pools everywhere, but the pools are more than just pools. What they really are entryways into whole other universes. So here they are, like in this place, in between places, able now to travel into any universe, into any world that they want. And what kid doesn't want to explore that and see what other worlds are like? So that's what they do, and they jump into this one pool and end up in this world that is at its end and is basically dying in this city called Charn. So that's the next thing that is also really cool, is we don't just see Narnia, we see a whole other world altogether. Charn is where the White Witch comes from, so we get a little bit of her origin and a little bit of the history of the city of Charn, just enough to go, well, that's interesting, and then just enough left to the imagination. So it's fascinating to get a look at this whole other world. And as the kids try to escape the White Witch and leave Charn with their rings, they accidentally bring the witch with them and end up back in our world with the White Witch. So this character from the other Narnia books is now in our world. That's the other thing that gives this book a different feel, because now we get to see this larger than life character in our world, a world that we know and we're familiar with, and we get to see how she interacts in our world. Like, her magic is utterly dampened in our world, so she's not walking around as some magical creature, which is very frustrating to her. But she's still incredibly strong, she's incredibly tall, she's like a giant in our world, so she's still a force to be reckoned with, and she's determined to conquer the world. So as she's wreaking havoc in London, she steals this horse from this London cabbie, and she's riding the horse around. The cabbie's trying to get his horse back. Uncle Andrew's all around the horse like, please, madam, please, you're all embarrassing me. Oh dear, what do I do? So now you have Diggory and his friend Polly who need to get her out of London, back to her world, and they use the rings and not just bring her out of our world, they accidentally take her to Narnia at its birth. But here's the other interesting fact. Because Uncle Andrew and the cabbie were so close, they too get drawn in and end up in Narnia at its birth. So whereas most of the books, it's just the children who make their way into Narnia, this time we get to see some adults come too. And we get to see their interesting perspectives, because the cabbie is in awe. Because as they're in Narnia at its birth, Aslan is singing, and each note of his song creates something new, like a new life form, a star, a plant, an animal. Like, his song is creating life. Good luck, Netflix. I have no idea how you're going to do this segment about the song because it's written so well and so beautifully in the book. And the cabbie just kind of sits back at this song and he's like, wow, if I would have known that there were things like this, I would have been a better man all my life. Now, here's the first interesting quote from C.S. Lewis that really stands out to me, and it's this one right here. What you see and hear depends a great deal on where you're standing. It also depends on what sort of person you are. Because we see what sort of man Uncle Andrew is now. Because as the lion is singing, he's cowering in fear. He hates the lion's song. In fact, he's looking at it going, a lion should not be singing. It should be roaring. So he's like plugging his ears, trying not to hear it, trying to convince himself it's just roaring like any normal lion. And eventually, that's all he hears is roaring because of another great quote from C.S. Lewis. Now, the trouble about trying to make yourself stupider than you really are is that you very often succeed. I love that quote because it's stinking hilarious and yet it's utterly profound. And through this character of Uncle Andrew, who wants to be this fantastic magician playing with things that he doesn't understand, we see that illustrated. That he tried to make himself stupider because he was afraid of the reality that he was facing. And so he just walled himself off to it. Really what the story is, it's about overcoming temptation. So what does Uncle Andrew do? He gives into temptation every chance that he gets. His godmother on her deathbed gives him this ancient box with dust in it. And he figures out this box is from the lost city of Atlantis. The dust is magical. He turns these into these yellow rings and these green rings. The yellow rings take you out of Earth. The green rings will bring you into a world, like from the wood between the worlds into another world. So he figured that much out, but he's kind of an idiot and hasn't figured anything else out. And he gave into temptation because the godmother said, burn this box. But he wants to be this great man, this great magician, above the rules. So what does he do? He keeps the box and he plays with a magic that he doesn't understand. And then when the children point out to him, that's kind of mean that the godmother on her deathbed said, destroy this box, and he promised he would, but lied and didn't. He's like, oh, great ones like myself have a high and lonely calling, and therefore cannot be bound by the rules of common man. Now, what's interesting is when he says that, he has more in common with the witch than he does with any other character in this book, because the witch, who basically represents Satan, is in Charn and says the same thing. She used this word called the deplorable word. When there was a threat to her rule, when her sister was gonna take her place and she couldn't stand it and she waged war, she spilled blood, and the armies agreed not to use magic against each other, and she lost. What did she do? She used magic. She spoke this deplorable word, which was very similar to the Thanos snap. You know, Thanos, at this point, was merciful compared to the witch because he only killed half of all the universe. Her word killed everyone. But what was her justification for breaking her promise? It is a high and lonely calling, and those of us great ones are above the rules of the common folk. So we're seeing his pride, that his pride is like the pride of Satan, and it's leading to a great fall. So like I said, when he's in Narnia, he's making himself a good deal stupider. He's blocking himself from hearing the song of Aslan. So at the very end, when he's actually brought before Aslan, and he's scared and he's trembling, the children are saying, can't you say something to him to make him not afraid? And anything Aslan could say to him, he wouldn't hear it, because now he would just hear these roarings and growlings. And Aslan said my other favorite line of all time, "O sons of Adam, how cleverly you defend yourselves against all that would do you good." Because it's so true, isn't it? How greatly we defend ourselves against all that might do us good. And he closed himself off to Aslan, who we really see is loving and compassionate and merciful. He walled himself off to all that love and all that compassion and all that mercy because of his pride, because he had to be the great one. Every temptation he encountered, he failed. Then we have Diggory. From the beginning, C.S. Lewis does a good job connecting us to him, and we just feel for this kid. because his mother is dying. She has a terminal illness and she's on her deathbed. His father is working in India to try to help support the family, pay for the doctors, all of that stuff as he's staying with his aunt and his uncle, and he's all alone. So he meets this neighbor girl named Polly, and she becomes his only friend. And so when we see him like in the wood between the worlds and just wanting to go on adventures and explore other worlds, you could almost see that need to escape the pain that he's in, to escape the situation that he's in. So when they dive into this world of Charn, he's in no hurry. No matter how scary it is, no matter that it's a dying world, he's in no hurry to go back because all that waits for him over there is pain. Here is adventure. Here is fun. And now he comes into this great hall where there's this bell. And there's a note on the bell. And basically, in Durban language, the note on the bell says, "Ring the bell, bide the danger, or don't, and wander forever. What if?" It's that what if question that drives Diggory insane. This was the witch's device. She put a spell on herself to be in this sleep so she won't die for these thousands of years until somebody rang the bell to wake her. But Diggory is reading this note and no magic is impacting him. No spell is taking over his mind. It's his own pride, his own temptation, his own fears, his own stuff that he's giving into, that he wants to know what's going to happen if he rings the bell. What if? He can't handle another what if. He has to ring the bell. He has to know, and he rings the bell, waking up the witch, causing all of the evils that happen in Narnia through all the rest of the series because of this one moment and this one epic failure. And yet, C.S. Lewis did a great job where we feel this compassion for Diggory. In between this, when the witch is running free in London and she accidentally comes out of Charn with them and ends up on our planet and is running free in London, he's waiting for her to come back to the apartment. And as he's sitting there waiting for her to come back, he overhears his Aunt Letty saying to somebody like, it's not looking good. The only thing that could cure her now is a fruit from the land of youth. I mean, it's just one of those things that's like, that's how impossible the situation is. But now that he knows other worlds exist, this adds another layer of temptation. Now he definitely has to go explore other worlds because he's got to go find the land of youth. He's got to go find a fruit from the land of youth because if he can actually find that fruit, it could bring his mom back. And when they go into Narnia and they're there at the beginning when it's created, yeah, he's thinking the land of youth. If I could just bring something back, a fruit back from this world, and my mom could eat it, she would be well. But he brought the witch back into that land. So Diggory goes to Aslan because he wants to ask him for this fruit from the land of youth. But as Aslan is talking about the great evil that is in the land, the full weight of what he's done, the full weight of his failure begins to weigh down on his shoulders. Now here comes my favorite image in all of the Narnia books. When Diggory is brought before Aslan, and Aslan is saying, by the hand of Adam and Eve was this evil done, and it will be the hand of Adam and Eve that will help. The weight of that guilt has him looking down at Aslan's claws. And as he's looking at those claws, they're sharp, they're scary, and he's just terrified, and he's agreeing, yes, I will help. I don't know how I can help, and I'm sorry I've done this. And we just feel it. We want him to bring a fruit home to his mother to heal her. We want him to ask the lion for it, but we understand the guilt that he's feeling. He's looking at the claws, feeling the fear and the condemnation. But finally, his desire to help his mom gets the best of him, and he looks up from the claws, and when he sees Aslan's eyes, he sees tears. He sees love and gentleness and mercy. I love that image, looking at the claws and looking at that fear, but then looking up at the lion's face and in his eyes, seeing his heart. He actually saw in Aslan's eyes that Aslan actually loved his mom more than he did. That Aslan was moved with even more compassion for his mom than even he was. It was breathtaking for him to look up at the lion's face and see that. So the lion asks him to go on this mission, to go to this sacred walled garden, to enter through the gate and pluck a fruit from the tree, an apple from the tree, and to bring it here so that it can be planted. And here it would grow a tree that would repel the witch so that Narnia could live in innocence for at least a couple hundred years or so. So that's the task, the call to adventure that he's being given. He agrees to do it. And what's also so powerful is after this imagery, after him seeing the lion's face, he enters his next temptation. And as he goes into the garden, he sees this beautiful garden, these beautiful gates, and there's a note on the gate doors, and it says this: "Come in by the gold gates, or not at all. Take of my fruit for others, or forbear. For those who steal, or those who climb my wall, shall find their heart's desire, and find despair." So he goes in obedience, through the gate. But lo and behold, the witch is there, and she has just eaten an apple. And he could tell she scaled the wall. She didn't come in through the gate, she scaled the wall, which I think is the picture in John chapter 10, where Jesus says that it's the thief that doesn't come in through the gate. So we're seeing the picture that the witch is the thief. She didn't come in by the gate, she came in by another way. When Diggory runs out through the gate, she scales over the wall again. This time she's really tempting him, and she's saying, "Don't take the apple back for the lion. Have you not thought that that will heal your mother? I've eaten it. I feel it. Eternal life." And the temptation was utterly overwhelming. But what I find really cool is there were two things where he was able to overcome that temptation. Thing number one, he remembered Aslan's eyes, looking up from the claws to his face and seeing the love and compassion in the lion's eyes, even the compassion for his mother. And the witch slips up and says, "Nobody has to know that you didn't listen to the lion." Because Polly, his friend, was there, and he's like, "Just leave Polly here in this land and go back with your magic yourself. Leave her behind so nobody can tattle, and save your mom." The cruelty of that exposed her heart. The compassion on Aslan's face exposed his heart, so he continued to obey and did what Aslan said. Now this is the next image that is so awesome in The Magician's Nephew. When Diggory comes back and they plant the apple and it grows this tree, Aslan says, "Yeah, the witch ate an apple. And guess what? She's gonna live forever. But length of days with an evil heart is only length of misery." Because she was the thief. She went in that garden in disobedience, and she stole what didn't belong to her. Goes back to that quote from earlier in the book: "What you see and hear depends a great deal on where you're standing and the sort of person you are." What an important quote this turned out to be. The witch reaped what she sowed because of the sort of person she was. She was evil, she was self-centered. She was the thief because she didn't go in through the gate, she scaled the wall, and she stole the apple. The apple, as Aslan said, was going to work according to its nature. So the picture here is interesting. She ate the apple and got everlasting life, but with an evil heart. And length of days with an evil heart is only length of misery. And that is something she came to find. She got what she wanted, and she despaired because God is not mocked. A man reaps what he sows. She went in there with a selfish heart and selfishly stole an apple, and that's the harvest that she reaped. Aslan went on to continue with this interesting imagery, and he said, if somebody broke into that garden, like scaled the wall and stole an apple and planted it here to grow this tree to protect Narnia, it would protect Narnia. But not by making it a kindly country, but by making it a horrible, self-centered empire like the city of Charn that had fallen. It would be a terrible empire. Why? Because a man reaps what he sows. It was stolen out of fear, stolen in selfishness, and it was sown that way, and that was the harvest that got reaped. But it was different because Diggory went through the gate in obedience to what Aslan told him to do. He took the apple, overcame temptation, and brought it back and sowed it, and so they reaped the good harvest from that good sowing. And then Aslan said, I have a gift for you. Take an apple home to your mother. That's what I love about The Magician's Nephew. I love all the different layers that are in this book, all the different pictures that are in this book. I just find it so incredible, and every time I go back, I find something new. What did you think of The Magician's Nephew? If you've read these books, what's your favorite Narnia book? Let's talk in the comments. While you're there, hit that subscribe button to become a Durbanian. Hit the bell by the subscribe button so you're notified the next time I do a movie review, ranking video, theological analysis, or anything else I do here. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.